Yes, and I also would like to greet some new faces, familiar faces. Welcome back to Green School. Selamat datang. So, yes, moving on to the next chapter. Recommence to the 5th session of V20 Summit 2022. Pandemic and other global crises that happened recently have decreased the quality of human physical and mental well-being, providing a value-based framework to support the global health infrastructure in the process of global recovery. And hopefully, it will raise the society awareness of well-being and construct compassionate and inclusive society.
For this next session, we have eavesdropped. We were listening to them chatting, preparing for this next session. I promise you, it will be very, very interesting, okay? We will have a discussion about well-being oriented policy recommendations and value-based statements on well-being. Inspiring talk. So let's give the warmest welcome to all the facilitators, speakers, and panelists of this session who are with us in Bali. The first one would be
Ibu Dr. Karina Jo. Yes, please give a round of applause. Senior Scientist of Jenner Institute, Oxford University, the co-inventor of AstraZeneca vaccine Indonesia.
And yayers to Ibu Karina Jo, and our facilitator for today is Bapak Stefano Petti, V20 co-founder, partner at Asterix Italy, is the V20 co-founder, partner as Asterix, a global organizational development firm, co-founder of A-Equacy, a revolutionary purpose-driven and value-based hierarchy-free organizational design, and a founding member of the global movement Values 20, which he co-chaired in 2021 under the Italian presidency of the G20.
Yes, and he is also one of the Italian partners for the Entrepreneurship Sports Generation Global Initiative, which aim to support the United Nations SDG through conscious entrepreneur. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. This is Wellbeing Inspiring Talk.
Nama saya Karina Citra Dewi Jo. Saya sekarang sedang bekerja sebagai postdoctoral research scientist di Jenner Institute. Saya juga menemukan formula untuk produksi massal vaksin Oxford AstraZeneca dengan hasil yang 10 kali lebih banyak.
Selamat pagi. Good morning. Such a privilege to be here in person. I feel sorry for the people that are connecting from home. Perhaps next time. So, Karina, let me add a couple of lines to your introduction. So, Karina is the lead scientist in charge of developing a process for large-scale manufacturing of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. And she represented Oxford in receiving a special recognition award who had made the COVID-19 vaccine in just 1 year. And she is also a recipient of Woman of the Year 2021 by Times Indonesia and Inspiring Woman 2022 by Forbes Indonesia. And I promise, I've been speaking with her quite a bit, and this list should be much, much longer. So I had the pleasure to speak with you a few days ago, very informal conversation, and I was really amazed by the story that is behind the vaccine, not just the official story, but also the personal story. But first of all, I know that you weren't born researcher. You were working, mixing different types of ingredients. Would you like to share something about that, please?
So yeah, Yes, yeah, I did my bachelor degree in University of Hong Kong, and before I continue on my Master of Biotechnology in Australia. So I did some cookery degree. So I was actually working as a chef for a few years. Yeah.
So, and you were in Australia, right?
Yes, I was in Australia.
Okay. So what happened next? Do you remember the period when you got some cold and COVID started to hit, and your life changed? Do you remember that moment?
Okay, so yeah, I did my cookery degree, and then I worked as a chef for a few years, and then my parents complained. They said, "How come I've never seen you?" I told my mom, "You told me to do cooking." and then and then I started to switch my career back to science. That's where I did my master and PhD in biotechnology, specializing in vaccines development. And then during the time I was writing my thesis, I had looked for some postdoctoral position in nature jobs. So the Oxford postdoctoral position was the first application that I applied. And then yet I got selected for the interview. And then after second interview, they told me, you're the top candidates and we would like to welcome you to join our university. So there's another third interview that I have to go through, but they said, forget about it, just come. We would like you to join us.
So, and I know that there was something that at some point happened, and you said you need to come and be involved in the COVID project.
Yes.
And they gave you a little bit of background around what that meant. What was your first reaction? What did you think? What did you feel?
So when I joined the Jenner Institute, so I didn't think there will be a pandemic. Nobody predicted there will be a pandemic. So I joined the team for other type of project, which is a rabies vaccine. So during the pandemic, they told me to change the focus at the moment, at that time. Like they only give me like a 2 weeks notice. At the beginning, I was quite excited because, okay, now I can work in such a hot topic area because the rabies vaccine is not quite popular at the time. But when they told me what is the scale that I have to work with, I called my supervisor crazy. I said, this is impossible. At the time, I was the only one who's working in the project, so we have no people. And then there was a lockdown, so we couldn't recruit any more people. And we have no funding, so it's quite a small academic lab. We don't have like industrial facilities or equipment. And then, no funding, no people, no equipment. There's the worst possible situation that you want to be in during the pandemic.
And what about the time frame? Because we know that developing a vaccine takes quite a bit of time.
Yes. So the first thing they set up during the beginning of the pandemic is the date of the clinical trial. So at the time, so they had already set the clinical trial schedule, but we don't have the vaccines. So that's I think it was funny for me because I keep telling my supervisor that you're crazy, this is impossible. And then, we have no facility to the large manufacturing production. So at the time, my supervisor sent an email to the Bioindustry Association asking for help. And then there's a lot of biopharmaceutical industry that is willing to help us by lending the facilities and equipment as well as the consumables. We are really thankful to the Pole Biotechnology. So they offered the facilities down we are in Oxford, so their facilities in Portsmouth. It's near a bit north from Oxford. And then they give me a deadline. So at the time, I was working on improving the productivity of the vaccine. So I managed to improve the productivity by 15 times, but I was doing it in such a small scale, which is like 100 ml or 2 tablespoons. But the Paul Biotech gave me a deadline, so by 1 month, 1.5 months, I need to have a process ready for 200-liter scale.
Well, I'm no scientist, but that sounds a lot.
So to give you a background, so to develop this kind of process, it takes at least 2 years in a group of people, like maybe 4 to 5 people. But at the time, I was working alone because there's a lockdown. There was a lockdown and nobody's around in the lab because everybody was sent home. So my supervisor is concerned with my well-being. Of course, I had to work. I couldn't get any COVID. So nobody can come near me. So they have to stay away. So during those times, I've never seen people, only working by myself in the lab. Yeah.
And you were getting food. Sometimes you were getting food, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and then another funny story as well. So my project manager and my boss was like thinking, oh, Karina couldn't go out because they were afraid that I will get COVID as well. So they forbid me to go outside of the lab. So I couldn't go to the supermarket. So the only times that the only way is to send me food 3 times a day in the lab. So my project manager will bring some food and then put it in the fridge. And then I will reheat up for 3 times a day. So I'm spending most of my time in the lab.
So it's amazing you're sharing this story with a smile on your face. It must have been very tough in those days. Now I know that you have some anecdotes from the experience. Is there anything that you would like to share? Maybe a story?
Yeah. Yes, so okay, the interesting story again, during those time I was given like 1.5 months time limit to scale up the production from 100 ml to 200 liter. The 200 liter is the minimum volume. So we could go from a 200 liter to 1,000 liter and then 4,000 liter scale. So for 1.5 months we don't have any time. So at the time, we don't have time to scale up the tissue culture or the cell culture from a single fire, which is 1 mil. So the only way that we could speed up the production is to shift the cells from my lab into the Paul Biotech lab in the Portsmouth. But we don't have any transport means. So the only way is for my project manager to take up the cell in some makeshift flask. And then he will drive from my lab to Paul Biotech lab. But the problem at the time, there was a lockdown. So nobody could drive for that long, for that far. So he had to apply for a letter from the university that mentioning, please don't catch him. So because the police will arrest anyone who will drive for that far. So he brings the letter with him saying, please don't catch him or don't arrest him. He is bringing some important stuff to do the vaccine production in the Paul.
That just gives a small idea of how tough it must have been to finally get to that vaccine. It's just incredible.
Yes, and then the funny thing is, because it's a tissue culture, if you know like basic biotechnology, it's a cell culture in the suspension. So it has to be shaken every 5 minutes, and it has to be kept at certain temperature. So I fill up like a styrofoam boxes, filled by like a warm water, and then his assistant will shake the box every 5 minutes.
That's incredible. So I was also, and I must admit that yes, you read things on magazines, and but I was also quite impressed when we were talking about the philosophy that is behind this specific vaccine, and I wonder if you can maybe share more about that.
So the first thing that we heard, there will be an outbreak. There's an outbreak in Wuhan in China, and then the first thing that come in our mind in Oxford is there will be a problem in the vaccine distribution, of course, because we know from the last pandemic, there's like a severe problem of vaccine nationalism, which is some countries, some high-income countries, will get the first priority in the vaccine queue. So we are thinking a lot on how to settle these problems. So the first thing when we design this manufacturing program is to implement the distributed manufacturing program. So most of our manufacturing facilities are located in the low middle income countries, in the developing countries such as India. So our biggest vaccine producer is India, Serum Institute of India, and Korea and Thailand, and so many other manufacturing facility in the developing countries. And as you know, the countries that produce the vaccines will have equal powers as the biopharmaceutical industry that produce the vaccine. As in, they have the power to decide who will get the vaccines and which price. So with the distributed manufacturing, we hope that we can promote the vaccine equality to the low middle income country. And secondly, so we know that to get out of this pandemic, everyone's needed to use the vaccines, but not all of the country has the strong financial power in the bid of getting or bidding for the highest price for the vaccines. So as other major vaccine programs, so they will open the bid who can pay the most expensive price for the vaccine. Those countries will get in the first in line, but our system, as in the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines, we distribute the vaccines without profit. So we want everyone to get the same equal rights to get the vaccines at the lowest price possible, which is the production cost and distribution cost. So for those countries, developing countries again, and low middle income countries has the same right, and they can afford these kind of vaccines to save, of course, our goal is to save lives, not for profit.
Now, if we go back to something that you shared earlier, so at the beginning you had no resources, you have very limited amount of time, it really seemed like a mission impossible, but then all of a sudden something started to happen, and this company started to get interested and started to get closer and started to want to support you. Can you tell a bit more about that?
Okay, so in the beginning in Oxford, we developed the vaccines ourselves for a couple of months. And then we started to realize that to have a global distribution, we have to partner with global biopharmaceutical countries. So at the time, Oxford has the policy, so the non-profit taking policy during the pandemic. So AstraZeneca have thankfully accepted the offer among the other biopharmaceutical companies. And then, yeah, things started to get well. And then I had to develop the process quickly from 200 liter. And then at the time, because of the time limit, I couldn't optimize the downstream processing, which is the purification process for the vaccines. But to go to 1,000 liter to 4,000 liter, something has to be done. So we partner with AstraZeneca to improve the manufacturing process for the large scale. And then AstraZeneca takes the process beyond what we expected. And then now we have the vaccines distributed in 189 countries. And then we have produced more than 4 billion doses at the moment around the world. And
sounds like a big number.
Yeah,
Now-
kinda.
Now I know that you had, now I mean, we are here and now you're telling the story, and again, it's amazing how much lightness you bring as you share your story. But I know that there were tough times, and there was even a moment when you almost decided to give up.
Yes, because at the time I have mentioned we have no funding, we have no people, we have no time. So the core team is myself. I am in charge of everything that's happening in the lab, so I'm actually doing everything in the lab. The other one is my supervisor. He's in charge of communicating my results to all of our partner in the consortium. So we collaborate with 25 different manufacturing facilities in 5 different continents, in 15 different countries. And then the other one is my project manager. So he's doing all the budgeting and the funding. So yeah, so we don't have any time to spare. So we all really work hard for this project. We work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week without any break. And then during the time that we scale up to 200 liter, I thought, okay, my work is done, but there's another work to scale up to 4,000 liters. So my work is not getting less at that point. It's getting more and more. And then, yeah, the pressure is really great because they have set up the clinical trial date. So the patients already came to take the first shot, but we don't have enough vaccine doses for the second shot. So my boss told me, Karina, it's okay. If you made a mistake, it's okay. But I know in reality I couldn't afford to make any mistakes, because if I made the mistakes, that means we don't have vaccines for the second shots, for the clinical trial, so which is a big issue for the whole program. So at the time, the pressure was so great, that means I couldn't make any single mistakes. I have to have all the experiment like 100% successful to get the results to be distributed to all of our partners so they can do what I've done in the lab. So at the moment, at some point, I have my breakdown moment. I told my boss in the meeting, sorry, I couldn't do this anymore. I want to quit. And then my boss told me, okay, we'll end this meeting now, but after this, can I call you one-on-one? So, okay, then he called me afterward, and then I told him again, sorry, I couldn't do this anymore. I just want to leave. I couldn't do it because the pressure is too great, and I was so tired at that moment. And then he knows that if I walk away from the lab, he couldn't do anything because this is not what I signed up for. This is not what's in my contract, because this goes way beyond what we have agreed before. So he just told me 2 things. One is, Karina, we are the scientists. So this is what we are working for. This is what we are studying for. We all are all working for this moment, and this vaccine has the potential to save lives. So at the moment, at that time, so we are working so hard, but we don't know if the vaccine could be used because it still has to go through the clinical trial. So it might fail, it might succeed, but we have the risk that our hard work will not be used by the society. It can fail. So like most of the clinical trial drug product will fail at maybe phase 3. So we have a big chance that our product will not be used by the society. But he said this vaccine has the potential to save lives. And okay, and then the second thing that he told me, Karina, many people are dying. Do you really want to walk away from this? So after that, after I heard that, I couldn't argue, right? So the next day, I just turned up to work as usual.
If this isn't responsibility in action, and the demonstration of what values can do, I don't know what it is. So thinking about the whole experience, to me really as you were telling me the story, it really seemed like a mission impossible that became possible at some point. And we heard stories like this before, so there is something that happens at some point, there is something that is there that allows the impossible become possible. So what do you think happened there? What was there that made it possible?
First thing, of course, we are very grateful to our all collaborators. So we collaborate with 25 different manufacturing facilities, and there is a strong support, even though it's not from the beginning. So in the beginning, we don't have the funding from the government, so we got the funding from April 2020. Yeah, and then we work together with the government, academia, and the industry. So the first key for successful program, any major vaccine program is the collaboration between industry, academia, and the government. So all of the elements in the society has to work together to come in. And then the second unique experience that I have is when I have the meeting, all of the industrial partners that usually compete with each other, they can have a discussion and they put their self-interest aside and they all work together to find a solution to our problem. That's, I think that's the interesting bit of my experience there. So because in the normal life, they wouldn't talk to each other because they are like a competing partner, a competing commercial entity.
That sounds a lot like other situation and contexts that we know very well. So what do you think made it possible for them to go beyond their self-interest and come together?
I think there's an urgency at the moment, at the time, that they know this pandemic is like a global problem, and they know if this pandemic continues, it will only making the things worse, not only for them, but also for the society, because the lockdown is really detrimental to every element of the society. So yeah, the economy, the global, the social problem, it caused a lot of economic problems to not only to the commercial side, it's also for the citizens.
So this is very interesting because we know that G20 is all about finding a common ground to deal with global challenges, and if COVID has been and is still a global challenge, I don't know what it is. So there are a lot of similarities here. You were dealing with a global challenge. You had to deal with stakeholders that normally had conflicting interests but managed to come together, going beyond the self-interest and work together for the sake of a greater good. So that sounds, I'm not Indonesian, of course, but that sounds a lot like an application of your value, gotong royong. Right?
Yes, that's right, gotong royong.
Okay.
Can it work? It's like working together, collaboration.
Okay, so that is real demonstration of what that means in action. So what would be, if you were to maybe take out from your own experience and everything that you shared, two or a couple of suggestions for the G20 to consider that may be applicable also in the context of other global challenges, what would those be?
Yes, I think the major stumbling block for our vaccine program is actually the manufacturing. The manufacturing is limiting at every step. So we don't have enough vaccines in the beginning because most of the manufacturing facilities are not ready to adopt our process. So I would suggest for maybe any countries or the government to invest more in this kind of facilities to prepare for the next pandemic. So I would suggest for government to invest in this is so-called the warm lit facilities that may have. So to get the manufacturing ready, we need three things, which is facility, equipment, and the skills. So we have to train people to know how to run the process according to the standard, which is quite a strict standard called CGMP, good manufacturing practice. So yes, I would encourage the government and many other countries to invest in this kind of facilities. I understand not all of the countries can spend that much funding for this kind of facility, but a group of countries can come together to prepare for this kind of facilities. And during the normal times, they can produce other type of vaccines that is used for the routine vaccinations. But during the pandemic, those process can be used to produce these type of vaccines to speed up our process to distribute the vaccines for this global pandemic. So we can actually control the pandemic in time. So we don't have to wait for a year to get like 1 billion doses of vaccines. So we could get the vaccine in a couple of months that will really help to reduce the casualty for this pandemic.
So it's a little bit like saying we should really strive to have a more proactive approach because we are way too reactive, and the COVID situation, of course, nobody could expect such a big pandemic to explode, but I think that's a bit the tendency to react on things as opposed to anticipate things. Anything else you would recommend?
Yes, I would really like to encourage to have a lot of collaborations between the academia and industry, because it really helps for countries to learn how to develop this kind of technology. So this technology shouldn't be monopolized by the developed countries. So I think we need to do some technology transfer early for these low middle income countries, so they know, they can anticipate what will happen during the pandemic. So they already have some expertise in the country before we actually have to do the production process or any vaccine development process.
Thank you. Now, I know that this is not the end of it, of course, and your life will still be about COVID, at least for the foreseeable future. But I also know that there is another challenge that is coming up.
Oh yes, yeah. So my trip almost got canceled because, okay, there's an outbreak. And then, yes, we have to make another type of vaccines very quickly now to control the outbreak. So at the moment, I'm working for making a lot of Ebola vaccines to control the outbreak in Uganda and in Sudan. We are still making an effort to produce that vaccine.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's also a demonstration of how sometimes we are so focused on something that is under the eyes of everybody, but we tend to forget that there are other emergencies that are there and that need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So what will happen there? You already know?
Yes, now we still collaborate with Serum Institute of India to mass produce these Ebola vaccines. And then our Ebola vaccine, also made in Oxford, is still under clinical trial, but we'll see the results soon. So if the vaccine passed the clinical trial again, then we will soon release the Ebola vaccines for Africa use.
So another big challenge, it seems like. So, any plan on a personal level? Because it's all about work. Are you ever going to be on vacation? I know it's your first time in Bali, by the way, is it?
Yes, that's right. It's my first time in Bali.
Okay, so you have to come back, as a lot of us, but on vacation.
On vacation.
No work this time.
Only vacation. Yeah.
Only vacation. So what's going to happen next? Do you have, like, at some point, an idea of taking a little break? I think
Yeah.
one of the lessons for you was, also to take a little bit care of yourself.
Yeah, hopefully there is no more outbreak. Hopefully, I'm crossing my finger. Yeah.
Okay. And that there would be other people anyway, also working and supporting, hopefully.
Yes, yeah. Hopefully there are more people with the same expertise and skill that can help us during our process. So yeah, it will make our life easier.
Thanks so much, Karina.
Lagi dong tepuk tangan yang lebih semangat buat Dr. Karina Jo. She should be our national treasure, you know.
She should be,
She
definitely.
should be.
And I am so glad to have your work inside of me, literally. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. I am AZ too. Stefano, would you like can you both stand here for the picture in front of the table? Me and Kinan were just discussing. We're planning to make a movie titled Understanding Karina. We need money. Do the crowdfunding for us, okay? Amazing story, Karina.
So yeah, please give another round of applause. Thank you so much.
Such
Thank you so much.
dedication, such commitment. What was I doing when I was 34? Wasting time partying.
Biotechnology, chef, go back to the science. Yeah. Have we maximized our potential yet? I think.
By the way, Bapak Stefano, when she was working as a chef, she was working at Nobu. So it has to be top notch. When it's about Karina, she has to go all the way, okay? Wow, amazing. Bapak Stefano, please remain on stage for your next session. Everybody wants to take a picture with Karina now. Okay. Amazing. Okay. While waiting for the photo session, very inspiring, yeah, the talk we just had.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. You just earned yourself a foot massage from me, personally, as a thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda, where we will discuss deeper about Wellbeing Task Force in a panel discussion.
I'm inviting to the stage all speakers, Ibu DY Suharya, V20 2022 Task Force co-lead, founder of Alzheimer Indonesia, Regional Director, Alzheimer Disease International, Indonesia.
Also, Ibu Dr. Maliha Hashmi, V20 2022 Task Force co-lead, Global Health Leader, WEF Global Future Council Expert, Saudi Arabia.
And all panelists for the panel discussion, Ibu Maharani Syahratu, Kertapati, Head of Research and Development, Daya Dimensi Indonesia. And Bapak Victor L. Magdarao, Senior Business Advisor, Development Dimension International, DDI, the Philippines. So let us begin. Wellbeing Task Force panel discussion.
Welcome all. Welcome DY.
Thank you, Stefano.
So
Thank you
now,
so much.
I know that before we move on to the task force, I know that a lot of people might be wondering, why DY? What's that stands for?
Oh, my real name in birth certificate is Kusuma Dewi Suharya. And Kusuma is flower, Dewi is goddess, and it doesn't fit my personality. So my sister here gave me nickname DY. It's more sporty. That's why I go by DY.
Well, thank you, because I couldn't pronounce the actual name, so you made my life much easier. So you are one of the task force lead for
Yeah.
well-being. So of course, the first question is, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what was covered in this beautiful task force?
Thank you, Stefano. So I was so honored and grateful when my dear friend Yuri trusted me to be a part of Wellbeing. It's a cause that, it's a theme that is actually close to my heart. And you know, the whole process of the Wellbeing Task Force starts from reviewing abstracts. Could we have the slide, please? So basically, there are approximately, I think, 16 abstracts submitted from 22 contributors from 10 countries. And while we're waiting for the slides, yes, values at the center. Okay, I have this. Next slide. So, as you know, Indonesia, the chair presidency of this year, we have the 3 pillars: global health architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. And I think the idea is you cannot leave values behind, and how we can deepening understanding of G20 leaders on the importance of values in their decision making. And very honored because we really have this sustainability compass, nature, economy, well-being, and society, and how the group of Wellbeing Task Force really work closely together for the past more than 6 months. And I'd like to acknowledge the team behind the scene. It's Kata, Jessica, Olin, Rafael, and all the team under leadership of Yuri, Maika, and Idan. I really appreciate their work because we have already things in our plate. And so these things really help us. I'll give you an example of how the whole process of our work for the past 6 months or more started off with kickoff meetings, discussions, and this is people who are really, really busy, but really committed in their work. I also would like to acknowledge our colleagues here, the writers, my partner in crime, Cassandra Lee, Ho Kake, Chris Drake, Richard Erickson, Rizka, Bu Fifi, who actually contributed so much on this work. And of course, the people here that are not available, around 14 people from those 10 countries and 5 continents. So the whole process, including deliverables of the, thinking about the theme, the theme of well-being, psychological resilience in a network society, and also on enhancing well-being in the challenging times, as well as public health issues that my colleague Maliha will be talking later. So this is what I was talking about, the whole process of 16 abstracts, 10 countries, 3 final sub-chapters, and the values we believe in is in quality life, empowerment, collaboration, and of course, respect. Okay, I'm too early on this.
Okay, thank you. So, and I know that there has been an amazing work going into those chapters. We will have an opportunity to hear more very soon, also from the voice of some of the people that actually contributed to writing those chapters. And this is what you've been doing as a task force lead, but I also know that there is a personal story that you have that led to be so close to the topic of well-being. Can you share about something about that, please?
Sure, Stefano, thank you. Well-being is a really, really important subject in my life. When my mom was diagnosed with dementia in 2009, 20 years before that diagnosis, nobody knew that that's dementia. And so dementia is a neurodegenerative disease affecting the brain, affecting memory, emotion, executive decisions. So one person is diagnosed with dementia, the entire family is affected. As you can see from the slides here, oh, before I forget, I'd like to acknowledge my dad, who's a main caregiver for my mom. My dad, could you stand up, please? 93 years old. Yaya Suharya. coming all the way from Jakarta to Bali just to see her daughter speaking. And we've been together in caring for my mom with, yeah, thank you. So, well-being is, how's everyone feeling right now? Well-being is a feeling, being at ease, being healthy, happy, functioning well, psychologically, socially, mentally, financially as well. And this is something, this disease really affected us and the entire family. We can have the slides on the screen. So why it matters so much to me, because when we were in the journey of caring, had no clue at all what this is all about. It's really affecting the entire family with those change of behavior, forgetting everything, repeating everything. But once we know that this is actually, the brain is basically shrinking and there's no cure yet. So what we can do is strengthen the support system, care. So from having my mom was diagnosed with dementia, it led me to build a support group in Indonesia back in 2013, and led me to be a part of the Alzheimer's Disease International, a federation of more than 100 organizations on dementia, because there's 55 million people with dementia around the world, 26 million in Asia Pacific, 1.2 million in Indonesia. So this topic is really close to my heart because it's so important to have a really solid support system and having really focus on this matter, including in this, of course, including in this G20 communique. So it's important because, again, looking back in 2017, the Japan G20 chair presidency actually including dementia and aging in the communique because it's an aging population in Japan.
Thank you. And I didn't want to, let's say, complete your introduction on purpose because I wanted first you to share your personal story. But now I can say that what you're saying may seem easy. You had a personal situation and that gave you the energy to do something, but that wasn't easy at all. Because at the end, today, you are the regional director of Alzheimer's Disease International Asia Pacific region and founder of the Alzheimer's Indonesia, an NGO that aims to improve the quality of life of people with dementia and also support the family caregivers. And that works together with the Greater Alzheimer's Association to increase awareness about these diseases. And also how we can take care and reduce the risk, so take a more proactive approach to it. And that comes with your 20+ years of experience in public health, public-private partnership with health communication, and so on and so forth. So what I also want to share, though, and people, I think, can also see that, that you have been recently acknowledged as a UN Decade Healthy Aging 50 Leaders by the World Health Organization.
Yes. Thank you, Stefano.
So that is what happened when you don't just leave a situation, difficult situation, but you also act on it. But please, I'm very interested to know this because, I mean, a lot of people go through tough times, but not all of them then act on that suffering and are able to do something like what you did. What was happening for you that gave you that spark, that energy? Yes, there is the personal story, but there is something more.
The drive to share, the drive, the diagnosis impacted me, my well-being, and knowledge is power. So having that knowledge, having a support system that you're not alone really matters. Loneliness is a big deal. So you want to avoid depression, mental health, and all these issues. So basically, it's a commitment, a lifetime commitment because of my mom's legacy. And at the end of the day, it's all about improvement of quality life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I want to, because I'm a very pragmatic person, I also want to, let's say, ask you a question that is very pragmatic, because we are here within the context of the Values 20, the G20, so we're talking about decisions, and we're talking about conversations that then need to produce an impact.
Yes.
And one thing that probably around the world we are not so good at is to leverage best practices.
Okay.
And I know that there are best practices already in this area,
Yes.
and you have a couple of examples.
Yeah. Yes, so in relation to G20, as you can see, all the work, it takes so much time, energy, vision, really appreciate since 2020, value of values in Saudi Arabia, values in action in Italy. Now it's values at the center. So we have to leverage, we have to scale up, and we know that there are two countries, New Zealand and Australia, that have committed New Zealand $5.9 billion well-being budget, and Australia, as part of the G20 country, committed $2.3 billion on well-being budget, focusing on the value of investing in mental health, well-being of all Australian, increased accessibility, services, and all those things. So the idea is, with our work, hopefully, with Indonesia chairing this presidency, we can step up and say, you know, influence 20 other leaders to commit on this well-being budget. So for instance, when we're in India, hopefully India will also commit to that and present, or Brazil, the next country. But bottom line is, we cannot stop. We have to keep moving. We have to keep advocating. We have to make the noise. I remember when I met the Indonesian Minister of Health, she basically said before launching the dementia plan, you created too much noise, so there's nowhere to hide. So when we created noise on this, we come up together and we say, here's an example of how well-being budget really have a significant impact in the level of quality life, level of happiness, level of well-being. I think we can do it together and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Diwa. So let's keep the noise high. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefano.
So do we have Dr. Maliha online? Hello.
Can you hear me?
So we know that your internet connection is not fully stable, so let's hope that it will resist until the end of this session. So Dr. Maliha Hashmi is a prominent health leader of the King of Saudi Arabia, a global health leader, winner of the prestigious Forbes Health Leadership Award in 2022, C-level healthcare executive, public speaker, and V20 delegate of the G20 and author, and part of the World Leaders Award recipients. Now, she's also one of the top 7 most talented female health leaders in the Middle East and North Africa region. So her top leadership works focuses on bringing more awareness about the importance of health and well-being in all aspects in policies and governments. And Dr. Maliha, we had the pleasure to work together last year under the Italian presidency of the G20. And I love your work, and I love the work you did this year. And I know how much you've been involved, not only with V20, but also on the topic of well-being and health, especially with the focus on caregivers. So that's where I would like to start, if you don't mind. From this special focus that you have on caregivers, the compassion fatigue and the burnout experience that they had, maybe we don't talk too much about it. Can you give us some light on this topic?
Assalamu alaikum, warm greetings everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today, and thank you for the introduction, Stefano. I wanted to just mention that well-being really became even more visible in the pandemic as an emerging public health emergency, requiring more awareness, compassion, empathy, resilience, collaboration, and responsibility. And the responsibility is on all of us. And furthermore, it became more threatened because of the recent overburdened health systems and other global issues that people sometimes don't talk about, like climate crisis. And what's interesting and really shocking is the statistics that comes out from the caregiver side. To give you an example, a study shows that nurses experience burnouts at the rate of 80% during the worst of the pandemic. So 80% of the nurses across the world were experiencing burnout as caregivers. Not only that, another study showed 61% of doctors globally experienced burnout during the pandemic. So we're talking about more than half the population across the world were experiencing burnout. Even more shocking is that 46% of these physicians themselves isolated themselves because of this depression and overburdening. And finally, 55% of the physicians and doctors experienced had friends, fellow doctors who either considered, attempted, or died from suicide. We're talking about caregivers. We just question what caregivers have to go through. And these are the same caregivers that were providing the safety and security for all individuals across the world. They're workers. They're the heroes of today and tomorrow that are experiencing this burnout and this compassion fatigue. And the responsibility, the onus is on all of us to be aware of this, but it's a responsibility on the leaders to pay attention and give that attention to these caregivers so that in the process, their well-being isn't compromised, which is why I've given a very special focus on caregivers, because some people in this scenario, very important to give them that attention.
Absolutely. If we don't take care of ourselves first, we cannot take care of others as well. So I know that you also had an interesting element of technology and innovation to the well-being area. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So also on the side, more than being a well-being advocate, I'm also an advocate for technology, but in a very different way. I'm a futurist, but I like humanizing technology. So I believe that technology is used to improve human relationships, not remove them. Every technology should be a human being in the end of the technology. Technology cannot be human involved. And hence the introduction of new technology, it can play a very huge role in maintaining relationships and eliminating burnout. We saw this during the pandemic when virtual care rise, and it became a sort of a shield of protection for those who were very lonely, and they were able to connect it to one another and virtually. So when the lockdowns happened, people weren't lonely because they were able to connect with one another, those who had access to technology. And what's important is we have to make it more accessible. And not only that, we saw that during the pandemic, this virtual care also helped accessibility that helped maintain the connectivity between the physicians and patients. And when the hospitals were going through a huge overburdening, again, when the caregivers were being very, very much in pressure and teams at the same time in the hospitals, technology made a huge role. And not only that, many healthcare professionals believe that AI actually can remove the bureaucratic burden and administrative tasks that exist, allow the patients to have more time with the physicians. So actually technology, specifically AI, medical devices can actually improve the workforce, streamlining the workforce's capability of functioning in hospitals so they can have better time with their patients. And actually a study showcased that just 3 more minutes with your physician can increase your well-being. How amazing is that just having 3 more minutes of time with your physician can actually improve your sense of comfort and empowerment in taking care of yourself. And if we use technology the right way, and it has become a huge forefront in terms of digitalizing hospitals, just adding those couple of minutes can improve relationships, also can impact and improve well-being, which I'm very much an advocate for, and which we've seen not just through the pandemic, it's become more on the forefront now than more than ever before. It's been accelerated because of the pandemic.
Well, thank you. And yesterday we heard a lot about the expectation that young people have towards leaders to set the example. And also when we talk about well-being, of course, we think about the example that leaders should bring forward. And there is a lot, of course, that they can do both in the private and public sector. What's your point on that?
Stefano, on all of us. There's each and every single one of us. But when we have responsibility, leaders come with a huge responsibility on hands. They have to be proactively involved in empowering their teams to be healthier and happier and stable citizens. Something that V20 has a forefront messenger for, and I'm so proud of the work that's been done so far through the V20. They have become the ambassadors of this change, of this awareness, and leaders have the responsibility to carry forward, to take this torch, showcase that this is a responsibility that needs to be catered to. They have to recognize that there's a link between mental well-being, physical health, and have to step in proactively in each and every situation before it should worsen. A place to end here is that a leader has to practice empathetic leadership. And what's interesting is that empathetic leadership has been a conversation in years before we even talked about it. But it was always a connection. It wasn't sort of an important element, a must-have for a leader. And what's interesting is, again, the pandemic and the situations that the world has faced and experienced globally, it's become a necessity. It's not just a consideration, necessity for every leader to have. Empathetic leadership is a must for a leader to be able to inculcate proactively, instill, implement in each and every citizen, in each and every employee, remember that they're good, so that everyone is stable, happier, and healthier. I talked about earlier caregivers. You heard the story. Well, leaders have a huge responsibility to really take care of these caregivers, specifically, hospital managers, to showcase that they care and that they must monitor their staff and make sure that their staff is dealing, when they're dealing with stressors, they themselves are okay. That is just a regular check-in on them. We need to have in-person employment assistance programs. We need to have time where people can have time out, where they can have buddy systems that they can relate to and express if they're, and take some time out, or they themselves have some severe depression. So empathetic leadership has become a key in instilling others and a very big response. And I hope that it continues to be practiced and becomes more of an official necessity for each and every single leader. And we're seeing that, and it's the pandemic brought the worst, the best out. And one of the most beautiful awarenesses through it was that empathy became something that was never a back burner. It became something that became in the forefront.
Amazing. Thank you, Maliha. I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask you to, let's say, distill in a few concepts your answers. So the first question is, I know that there are countries that made it through COVID better than others. They did particularly well. What do you think made it possible?
Well, absolutely. I started writing a book during the pandemic on how well-being leads the way to a more resilient society. And while exploring that, I worked on how different countries, believe it or not, the results weren't surprising. All the countries that fared well had some common. They all on their first. So the well-being of their is the necessity, and they had cooperation and collaboration internally and externally, and they had empathetic leaders. So the appropriate attention is given top down, the proper steps are taken by all stakeholders, then we have a chance of developing happier, healthier, more stable citizens.
Thank you. So we started with the notion of self-care and the importance of taking care of also people that are caregivers. And I know that you've been writing a book, and that for you was a way to take care of yourself. I would like you maybe to share something about that.
Sure. Mental health and well-being is something we cannot put in the corner. And just like we need dental hygiene, we need mental hygiene. So, ambassador of health and well-being globally, I have to talk, and personally wrote this book. I never thought it would come out into a book, but it was my personal proactive approach of self-care for my own well-being. It was cathartic because during the pandemic, I was under a lot of stress. I under enormous stress because I had a huge responsibility of developing regulation, essence, a frontline of ensuring other. This book was my own self-care approach, and I use this platform to encourage and proactively everyone to practice empathy and compassion for others, but at the same time, not to think about your own health and your own well-being, because when you're able to take care of yourself much more better. And health is what's going to unite us for a better society. Take care of yourself, empathetic towards others as well.
Thank you, Malika. What a nice message to end your part. Thank you so much for being with us, and also I'm very glad that the internet connection held until the end. Thank you so much. So, let's move to you, Vic. Can I call you Vic? Sure. Okay. So basically, just a couple of lines about you, so that people know who I'm talking to. So you, Victor Magdarog, extends advice to client organizations and provides solutions to strengthen business and financial acumen through the use of Chelemy business simulations. Currently, is also Senior Business Advisor for Development Dimensions International, DDI, formerly Vice President for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and Korea for DDI, and you're also an advocate for the Philippine Society for Orphan Disorders, which is, as we know, a rare condition, a rare disease. So I know that you care about a specific value. There is something that it's very dear to your heart, which is the value of inclusion, inclusivity. And when we talk about health and well-being, the topic of inclusion becomes, of course, very key, especially when we think about marginalized communities. A lot of the debate has been around how we can ensure that we have an inclusive approach in dealing with the COVID situation, the pandemic. Of course, that's under the eye of everybody. But what happens after governments pronounce the COVID epidemic over, especially if we think about these marginalized communities?
Okay, thank you very much, Stefano. First of all, I'm from the Philippines. The Philippines is not part of G20, so some of you might be wondering why am I here. I have been working with Daya Dimensi in Indonesia for so long. I think they have adopted me already as an Indonesian, so they asked me to come over. So kind of go through decades of relationship. One of the things we really are concerned about is the theme of G20 is recover together, recover stronger, right? So the idea, therefore, is at some point in time, we will drop the word recover, because we would have reached a point where we have either accept COVID as as part of our lives, or we have resolved the issue altogether. So it will just become together stronger. So that whole notion of together stronger really brings up to mind the whole idea of marginalized communities. So what do we do with them, and how will they play a part in the future? Even before COVID, we already recognize them as marginalized, which means they don't get enough help as they deserve, because by definition they're marginalized. So we're now talking about the whole idea of well-being, and we ask ourselves, why do we go into value creation? The economics, the subject matter of G20 conversation. And there's only one reason. It really is well-being of everyone. That's the reason why we do these things. That's the reason why we have business. That's the reason why we have governments creating policy that will say, we will help encourage businesses. So in that sense, it really is well-being is the ultimate goal. So well-being of everyone. So now we talk about some of these marginalized communities. And some researchers have stated that the disability groups, the disabled in the world, it's about 15% of the global population. So if we say global population is 8 billion, how many is 15%? That's about 1.5 billion people. All forms of disability. And all of these would have issues around well-being. We also talk about people who are with rare diseases. Rare diseases are types of diseases that we would say 1 out of 20,000 or 1 out of 100. There are about 500 million globally people afflicted with rare disease. The issue with rare disease is because most of them don't have known cures at the moment, and nobody really takes care of them. So that's really part of the world as well. Now imagine the world where you have 15% of the population, how many people would be taking care of them? Average of 2 and 3. So 1.5 times 3, that's almost half of the world's population affected by, by these issues. You add people with rare disease, that's another close to 1 billion. So it is not marginalized in that sense. They're marginalized because of their problem, but the implications and impact is much, much broader than that. So when we look at marginalized communities, it's not really small, it's really a very large part of the population. And you speak of well-being, so the whole idea then is, how do we then extend the fruits of economics, of the economy rather, to these individuals? So as you go out of COVID, and COVID is really because of the recency bias, we're all concerned about COVID, but after we have resolved that, what do we do with the marginalized communities? So we should continue to think about well-being of marginalized communities and everyone else in that point of time.
Absolutely. So that raises another question. Have we learned anything from the current pandemic that we can leverage for the future to mitigate these risks?
Yeah. One of the things we have recognized is because of the COVID, the initial impact, and I think this is part of a decision-making process that was already in place, is a lot of people who had other illnesses could not receive help, medical help. So they could not go into the hospitals because they're all closed, because they're all attending to COVID patients. So there were challenges in terms of problems of how do you continue to have health care. So I guess one of the lessons learned would be look into, if we are faced with another pandemic, how do we then look at other people who have healthcare needs, and how do you continue providing for them, and how do you segregate and separate them from these patients of the new pandemic in that sense. So those things, and how you then reallocate resources as well.
Not to lose sight of it, right?
I'm sorry?
Not to lose sight of them.
Yes, not to lose sight of it, correct.
Yeah. So I know that we started with the saying that inclusion is one of the values that is very dear to your heart. And of course we're talking about inclusion when we talk about communities that are not at the moment under the spotlight of the interest of G20 or in general. Can you expand a little bit on what inclusion is for you?
Well, again, we're looking at values at the center. How do we now convert this whole issue of marginalized communities, and what kind of values do we start demonstrating or expressing? And I would like to share this, this illustration or cartoon. If you can just please show the slide. Can someone show the slide on screen? Okay, there it is. This is not a new slide, but this was redeveloped by Dr. David Murphy. That's his work. So the reality, equality, equity side of the cartoon has been there for some time. So there are a few more people who added justice and inclusion. But just take a look at this illustration, and because I think this is a very powerful illustration. So the reality is some people have more resources than the others. So that's really the reality kind of portion of the slide. Second is the idea of equality. We should have all equal resources, right? But it doesn't help. So if you will notice from the illustration, equality does not really help the short person. Then we say equity, focus more on equity. How do we help those who are in need more of those things? So that's really what we do with our, social action, social justice kinds of programs. We provide for equity. But providing for equity may not necessarily resolve the root cause of the problem. So when we look at justice, we're now saying, well, maybe what we should do is remove the root cause in this illustration, which was the fence, preventing them from really enjoying that game, that ball game. And Dr. David Murphy added this whole idea of inclusion where you get the people to participate in the process in the game. But my own perception is there are times when they cannot really join the game because they're not professional players. And you don't come to watch non-professional players. You actually want to watch professional players. So maybe they should join the audience instead. So that's part of the whole inclusion process. But being included might just simply mean membership. But membership could also may not, again, not be as a stronger value as maybe the sense of belonging. How do we get people to really belong to society in that sense? So it's really how do you get to engage them? How do they contribute? So, for example, people with rare disease, how do they contribute to society? In 1960, there was this young boy in Texas who was inflicted with a very rare disease. And his rare disease was he had very high cholesterol, 6 times what normal would be. So people were studying what happened and what was causing it. So there are quite several number of biochemists who spent time studying it, and actually their study led to a Nobel Prize award on looking at that particular rare disease. This is one boy. And that work actually led to the creation of statin, which actually led to the creation of all the cholesterol medicines that we have in the world. And without that research done on that single individual with a rare disease, those of you who are using cholesterol, anti-cholesterol medicine, will not have it at this point in time. So there is value, and it's really more, you know, if you look at parts of the marginalized society communities, they can belong, they can contribute. And so it's really, I think, from looking at the values of inclusion and belongingness becomes very, very important in this whole, you know, if you want to put values at the center, rather.
Thank you so much, but also for helping us to reflect on what inclusion really means, because I'm sure that a lot of us in the past may have confused inclusion with a lot of these terms. So thank you very much, Vic. Please. So it's your turn. So Maharani Kartapati is an experimental psychologist with a master's degree from Pajajaran University and is a doctoral candidate from University of Indonesia. As the leader of the Applied Sciences and Imagination Center division at Daya Dimensi, Indonesia. She leads her team in conducting research and development initiatives while working with those stakeholders to identify new research areas, including performing comprehensive analysis and writing thorough reports for Indonesia's National Value Assessment, NVA, which was run in 2020. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure. And I would like to start from your own experience with the NVA, the National Value Assessment. I'm sure that a lot of people already know about that, but you know, it's quite remarkable what you did in Indonesia because you managed to involve, I think, a record number of people. Would you like to share something about that?
Yes, okay, thank you. First of all, hello everyone. I'm really delighted to sit here beside the three of you and in front of all of you. And maybe the slide, yes. The comedy, please show, yes. This is, for me personally, participating in the LAY movement is one of my proudest achievements as a researcher. Imagine that in 2020, we were reaching out to more than 50,000 of people in Indonesia from various background, age, education, demographic characteristic across 34 from that current time. Nowadays we have 37 provinces. And especially during challenging time in early beginning of COVID-19 spread. We are trying to ask them to rethink about their values as personal, as a society, as a nation, something that philosophically and fundamental that defines a person, a society, and Indonesia as a nation. So it's my biggest achievement as a researcher so far.
Thank you. And I know that there was a lot of learning that came out of this activity, this project, by attending this project. And I know that some of this learning can be really relevant for the conversation we're having. So what did you learn?
Okay, it's kind of this like a personal development journey for me, because when at the beginning when Ibu Meika Malaon, Ibu Enda Afif, dan Bapak Yuri Yogaswara asked me to help them in doing leading the analysis and report writing of the NVA. Personally, honestly, I did it just like blindly employed. Because yeah, imagine that my CEO asked me to do one daily life task as a researcher. But I began the journey with attending, joining workshop of Barrett Value Assessment and learning about the NVA methods. But the first reaction of mine when I started, when I joining the workshop is, I only criticize the method because I'm basically a quantitative person. I see I'm a psychometrician who my day-to-day work is just put a stamp in every entity, stamp number. I just have to like Stefano, your rate is 8. Budiwa, your rate is 9. It's my day-to-day work. But when I asked to analyze about what people see about their personal value and value as a nation, it's quite a strange thing for me, and honestly, at the beginning, I'm not so keen of that. But after practically, if you are familiar with NVA, the most rational thing for me is the entropy index, because it's suitable in my rationality. But when in the process of building the report and doing the analysis in online movement, the main thing is we doing a dialogue with numbers of stakeholders, like policymakers, academicians, like Professor Bambang Syargi here, Ibu Alisa Wahid also, and I came to the sort kind of relieving insight that it's not just about the number, it's not just a simple survey, it's not just we listing 10 most mentioned value by the people, but we are trying to identify our identity, our value as a nation. And the most challenging thing is how we can make the policymaker buy in with that, with our findings and our recommendation. Yes.
Yeah. So, for those who are not familiar with the MBA, I mean, it gives a picture of what doesn't work, but it's also giving a picture of the desired future state.
Yes.
And that is something very interesting where there is a tendency to be focused on, right? There is a focus that normally is on what doesn't work, as opposed to what is the future we want to create. Let's put our energies there.
Yes.
Is there something there that maybe can be useful?
According to my personal experience, if you can see in the slide, the focus of the many stakeholders that we are trying to make a dialogue is the high cultural entropy. Cultural entropy is the aggregate index of numbers of potentially limiting values that people see in our current society in Indonesia. And they mention about bureaucracy, corruption, discrimination, and many people are focused in how we solve the problem. But unfortunately, we are quite slightly inattentive with for me, right now, is the most important findings of this survey that we see that in the current culture values, more than 20,000 people choose gotong royong as a value that they still see in our society right now. So, personally, I think that it is our potential resource to move ahead, to solve many problems, and to develop as a country, as a society, and as an individual during and after the pandemic, especially.
So that's a very interesting reflection. You know, there is something that we can already leverage in order to create our desired future. Yes. And it's also interesting, it goes back a little bit to the difference between having a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach to things, and what is our natural tendency normally. And we saw that with the pandemic, of course. You know, something happens, we react, but then there is an opportunity here also to, you know, plan and do something more proactively to build our future. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We are running out of time, but I really appreciate all your contributions. Thanks so much. We heard very different stories. They were not just professional stories, they were also personal stories, and that reminds us that there is always a person behind everything, human being, and it's important to also keep the connection as human beings. But there was something that was a common thread that connected all these powerful stories, which was the ability from the wonderful people that we listened to put values in action. There was something that happened with all of you that at some point made you say, this is not just something important, I need to do something about it. So maybe this is also a reflection that we can put out there for the G20 to consider if this is what can happen when values drive actions. What can happen if values become an integral part of the policy-making conversations? And with that, I just want to thank you again. Terima kasih to all.
Terima kasih. Grazie, grazie.
And
Thank you.
I think we have to take, yeah?
Yes.
It's on to you.
Let's take a
Our
picture.
hosts.
Terima kasih Bapak Stefano Petti, Ibu Diwai Suharya, Ibu Maharani Syaratu Kertapati, Bapak Victor L. Magdarok, dan juga untuk the ones who are online. Okay. Dr. Maliha Hashmi, maybe the connection is still unstable. Okay, one picture to the center, everybody. Big smile. Very interesting panel discussion.
All right, thank you so
Okay.
much. Another round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You may please return to your seats. Thank you so much. Okay, soon enough we'll go to a break, right? But before that, Kinan, I would just like to ask you one more time about your involvement, because we were just talking about his involvement before the V20 summit itself started from the Nanilai, right?
Wow, that story goes back, I think, 2 years ago. We were working on this national survey. We had this vision, this idea with the Daya Lima team. And this is actually the first time, after 2 years working together, this is the first time we met.
Wow.
So it was amazing, it was amazing. So V20 was actually the pinnacle of our process, 2 years in the making, doing the value-based survey around the nation. And when we got the news, V20 is happening, the team was trying to think about how do we depict the visualization of this event. How do we find like one object that represent the whole philosophy of our value? And we couldn't find another perfect representation than the wayang.
The wayang.
The wayang. If you're not
Beautiful.
familiar, is a puppet show. It's a traditional puppet show. But what is so amazing about this cultural object, within the object, it represents a symbol of values, a symbol of compassion, a symbol of craftsmanship, a symbol of beauty, and a symbol of purpose. So yeah, we want to congratulate the team also up there for doing amazing work on the identity, on the visual. So yeah, thank you.
Great job. Amazing, Kinan. Thank you for sharing. And by the way, we just saw the QR code. If you happen to scan it already, please fill in the survey form for this session. Thank you for participating. So after listening to Kinan's story, we're moving on to the break. But we must remind you that we will start the next program at exactly 1 p.m. So nearing to 1 p.m., you will hear the sound of Kulkul. And please follow the sound of Kulkul to the arc again. So before your lunch break, we would like to also remind you.
So don't forget to visit our sponsor booth from Kalbe Pharma, which is the largest healthcare provider in Indonesia, who showcase some of their products today in their booth, such as Fitbar, Hydro Coco, Supplement Secatonic, and there are free medical checkup.
Also, there's a booth from Paragon Technology and Innovation, which has many famous cosmetic brands in Indonesia that provide natural purity in a halal, modern, reliable process, such as Wardah, Emina, and many more.
And Bye Bye Plastic Bag and Utopia, they provide a curated, sustainable fashion product.
Also, the booth of V20 collaboration project with Jumbo, where you can have the special edition of V20 merchandise and essential oils.
And also, Indica Foundation, you can ask them more, where they provide anything about sustainability.
While you're enjoying your lunch, you will be entertained by our local band outside. And most importantly, later on, you can also exercise the traditional Indonesian team-based games such as marble relay race, bakyak race, pass it on race, and balloon dance games.
And the mini workshop program located at the heart of the school, such as gamelan lesson and guided meditation session at music room, Balinese dance lesson at Wantilan, recycling and composting workshop at grade 3 room, and Janara art mini workshop at grade 1 room. And we wish you to enjoy all the mini workshop.
For those joining us online, the online participants, you may enjoy this break while watching some inspiring short films and clips from virtual movie corners.
And also, for those of you, the Friday prayers will start at 12:10. It will be located at the high school room near the Sangkap. So we hope to see you at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your lunch, everyone.